Okay, Alsatta Bakana, welcome. Thank you for coming on. The lead of Eagle Entertainment at Eastern Washington University. A good friend of mine. I'm really excited to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a long time coming, but we're finally here, so
We've been
feels
talking
good.
about this for over a year, right?
Yeah, I first messaged you about it gosh, last year before the school year even ended. I was like, give me 6 months and I'll probably have something to say.
No, I'm excited to have you on. I would like to start off just by asking how you got to where you're at. I want to hear a little bit of your story, if you're comfortable with sharing.
It's a long story, but I'll make it short. I was born in West Africa. I was born in Ivory Coast. I was born there because my family was fleeing from war in Liberia. My parents are Liberians, so moved to the Ivory Coast and then we came to the States. And then since being here, we've moved around a lot. The most recent place or the current place I live has been Chingy, Washington, Spokane, that type of area. Um, while living here, I started doing track, and that was like my major thing in high school. I was a track girl. And then I did the state thing, I did the records, I did the all the fancy schmancy stuff, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I got recruited, went to college. Well, started off my college career at UW. That didn't work out. So I went to WSU. That didn't work out. And so I'm back at Eastern, and now I am the lead coordinator for Eagle Entertainment. The year before, I was the diversity and outreach coordinator for Eagle Entertainment. So yeah, that's a little bit about my story.
Awesome. What made you want to get into entertainment?
Um, it was actually my freshman year at UW. Their school entertainment board was putting on a concert, and it was like the first concert I think I've ever been to. It was a Smino concert, and I was like,
Love
wow, that's
Smino.
really cool. And also like their lead or something like that, I thought he was pretty cute. So I was like, maybe maybe
Naturally.
if I start working with them, maybe I don't know, maybe something might happen. But it didn't work out like that, and
Hmm.
here I am 3 years later, 4 years later, the lead of the my school's entertainment board thing. So
And you just got back from Liberia. What was that experience like coming back? How long has it been?
gosh, we went, it was supposed to be for a month, but we ended up staying like a month and another week. So it was like a month and a half really. And it was really eye-opening because I hadn't been there since I was like a baby. And there's so many people that knew me and I didn't know any of
Yeah.
them. So that was pretty cool. But it was a lot of like just watching, learning, listening to my aunts tell story, how they interacted, kind of their thoughts about relationships, God, just a lot of like learning. And
Mhm.
also it made me like think more critically about structures and systems in America and also how that's affected like Liberia as well, because that is a colony of the States. I just learned a lot.
Like what would you say opened your eyes like in regards to like systems?
Definitely in the education system. Um, I say the education systems in the US kind of suck, but it's even worse over there because they're trying to copy US education system, but they're
Mm,
set so far back. It's more reminiscent of slavery times, even more so than it is in the US.
mm,
Like, for instance, like most schools wear uniform and you have to wear your hair in a certain type of style. And if know some history about the US, that's exactly how they treated Native American people and Black Americans too. And even like the way they kind of like treat women, it's not to say like the US really treats women any better, but we've gotten a bit further than they have.
Mm-hmm.
But it all comes down to like the education system. You can't begin to do better if you don't know better. And that's a major problem. And it goes into like government as well. If your government's corrupt and they're not putting money into the education system, then like you can't really have a nation of people that can begin to want to do better. So
Mm-hmm. I do want to ask like how you got into track. Like, what was your introduction to that?
it actually started in third grade when I lived in California. And every year there was like an annual like Rotary track meet type thing, and like all the schools around the area would be invited to compete, and it was pretty low key. But like in third grade, like I would always compete against like older kids because they used to do it by like height and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So I was always tallest in my class, so I always go against the older kids, and
Mm-hmm.
I did it for like 2 years in a row before like we moved to Texas, and that was kind of like my initial track introduction. And I loved it because I loved being faster than everyone, and I
Mm-hmm.
was always faster than the boys, so I was like, yeah, this is my thing. Like,
Oh yeah.
it's pretty cool.
I like that your experience was with that was better than mine because with the Pop Warner weight rules, I as a fourth grader was playing with seventh and eighth graders, and I
Yeah, that
was
was a little
getting
bit different.
yeah, I was 10, 11 going up against 12 and 13-year-olds, and that gap like fucking Kobe is like shaving like, and I'm getting my ass lit up by these guys. Um,
Right.
that made me shy away from it a little bit. But glad you had a better experience. When did you know you were like that? Yeah,
Like what?
like you could do something with it.
Well, in third grade, I thought, I was kind of like hot shit,
Mm-hmm.
But then I went to Georgia. I lived in Georgia for some time, and I was running the 200, and it was like the first time I ran the 200 ever in my life. And like, I had a good 50-meter start. And then like next thing I know, all the girls just, they dusted me, they
Mm.
gassed me. It was really sad. And I didn't think I had it at that point.
Mm.
I was like, I don't think I want to ever run again in my life. But then flash forward to like high school, probably my sophomore year in high school, when I start like running the times, and like running times that people I was training with like have been running, but like I was kind of new to the game and I was already catching up. I was like, maybe I should stick with this. And then, the conversations of college and scholarships started coming up, and I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm gonna get in academically, but maybe sports, maybe track's gonna be my thing. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think sophomore year was when I really was like, okay, I can do something with this.
Was it was it coming from you, or was it more the external where it's like, you're hearing how great you are, like the potential you have, there's avenues for you and the opportunities to make this happen. Like, where did that come from? Like, I'm sure there was a passion, but
Yeah, it definitely started off as a passion my freshman year. Um, it was just something I was curious about. Like my coach, he was having like a meeting at like a different high school, and I had a couple of friends that were going to that meeting, and so I just tagged along just to see what's up with it. And like he seemed like a cool guy. And so I was like, okay, I'll just give it a shot. And then I ended up trying his club team, and like I really liked it. I liked the community. I liked being around other Black people in
mm-hmm.
Spokane.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep going with it. And then I guess once they saw my potential, then it started like being something that they talked about. But like at first it wasn't really like, it wasn't like on the table flat out. I needed some work before it started coming in.
Yeah.
But it was a little bit of myself, like some passion and some outside voices saying
Mm-hmm.
that, yeah, you can do something with this. So yeah, so I stuck with it.
Was that validation you were receiving something that was there growing up, or was that a new experience?
I think the validation was always there from like a young age. So, like for instance, like in first grade, second grade, I was like always in the gifted and talented program of like every school I went to. So I always had like adults telling me, "Wow, you're special. You're so smart," you know. And then I was in like prep schools, like in middle school and this and that. And so I always had external validation, but then you combine that with being like a quiet, shy kid and also like a Black girl, and you kind of don't have the chance to form your own type of validation. Like you're already
Mm-hmm.
adhering to the system,
Yeah.
you're already in the mold of what you're supposed to be and what adults like. And so when you bring sports into that, the validation still feels good, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
that's just what you're used to. So you keep going with it.
It's a rush. Like getting that, like there was like for with playing football, that was something I always loved. Like from the start. Like my mom will tell stories where like I was in the stroller learning how to talk, and I would see like purple and yellow flowers, and I'd be like, "Oh, the Huskies are playing the Ducks," and we're like, "Man, this baby's weird as shit." Um,
It
but
is a rush. Like it really feels good being validated.
oh my god, yeah, and it's like from especially being like a standout as a kid, like I would meet parents' friends and get introduced to coaches and that kind of thing from elementary school, and it's always the comments like, wow, like you're so big, like you must be such an athlete, or they see me play and they're telling me how great I am. And so it's always coming from external factors. And like as much as I wanted it for myself, like it was also that seeking external validation from other people, especially growing up as someone who like didn't love their appearance and would seek it out in other ways, whether it was athletically or humor or art. Like, tell me why you love me because I'm not sure if I do.
Yeah, I feel that. Ooh, we're already touching on some subjects early on in the show.
Hmm.
It's cool though because I can definitely relate to that.
It's interesting to see how that from such a young age like forms an identity built around just seeking that high of people telling me how great I am. Did you experience similar things like that?
Yeah, I would say coming from an African household and, you know, the early part of my life, like I was with a single mom, like I just wanted to be the person, like, make her life easier and try to like get it done for my family and try to be that golden child basically. And when you fall short of that, it's kind of like because you have nothing else to really rely on other than like things people have been saying about you and to you, like it it hurts really bad, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I can definitely say like I've experienced those things. It's just culture, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah, and,
I
and
mean,
especially
yeah.
in like an American culture where your value is your accomplishments. And that was hammered home like growing up in my family. My dad, top 3 swimmer in the world, like 400 IM, Olympic level athlete. Mom was all Pac 10, 3, 4 years at Oregon State. You grow up hearing stories about just like greatness and being interested in sports. And so you're like watching these these greats, these like gods among other people in athletics. And then when it's at home too, it's like, okay, I want everyone to love me like that, you
Yeah.
know? What was it like for you when your track career ended?
Gosh, it was like, well, my track career ended twice. So
Mhm.
it ended at UW the first time because the coach that recruited me, he got fired. So like all his recruits were dropped off the roster and I was one of his recruits. And that was that was like a huge blow to me because like I said, I was doing club track before, so I had already competed at all these colleges against college athletes,
Mhm.
and I've had times like next to their times, and it's like I wasn't the slowest on the team, so I was like, why me out of everyone else, you know? And it was my freshman year of college too, and I had moved to Seattle, and the weather in Seattle when it's rainy is just it's gray all the time,
Mhm.
and so I knew I had got cut off the roster. I didn't know what the heck I was doing in Seattle. I knew I wasn't making any friends because, you know, it was just that bad. I wouldn't even leave my dorms most days. You know, I skipped meals. I it was so bad. And so that it was it was different from how it happened the second time, like the feelings involved, because the first time you can kind of like it was kind of like, okay, I'm in a place, I don't know anyone, the weather's terrible, whatever. It's just gloomy. It's not a good situation. I have to get out. There's a way out that first time. And the way out was that I got recruited by WSU as a walk on. And I just had to stay there for half the quarter, compete in the springtime. And the next year, they probably give me a scholarship or whatever. And then the second time my track career ended, it was worse because it was my fault and it was something I had to deal with. But I just felt like, long story short, I had let everyone down. I went to high school in a small town. Like I was like the person that made it out,
Yeah.
and that's a lot of pressure on an
Mhm.
18-year-old, especially someone that wasn't like in the right state of mind prior to that. Then you move into a new environment and then it's like you fuck up again. It's like now, like who's gonna give me grace this time? Like I should have known better, I should have done better. But the thing is I didn't know better because I didn't have anyone around me that knew what it would be like I'm a first generation college student. Like I couldn't explain to my mom like the pressure of like schoolwork and athletics, and also like trying to make friends and drugs and trying to relieve that so much feelings within you.
Mhm.
So I guess like when I got in trouble the second time and like my track career ended again, it was just like, what am I gonna do? There's nowhere to go, there's nothing to do. I remember after like my meeting with the head coach and like finding out there's like nothing else to do except being suspended for the rest of the season, and knowing that like my parents couldn't afford to like keep me at WSU for the rest of the time and all that, it was just so much shame. I didn't want to go back home. I didn't want to stay there either. So I just that day I like wrote everyone in my family like my peace out letter pretty much. And I had one friend I could talk to, and we talked. And I remember just laying there in that dorm room, already like I knew how it was going to go, but I just ended up crying myself to sleep and just waking up the evening and going to a party with my friend. And that's how it was. That was my coping,
Oh my
and that was
god.
that.
Thank you for sharing that. First of all, wow. And I'm glad you're here. I
Me too. I'm glad I'm here too.
I
Yeah.
yeah, I get it and been there as well. It's like I know we've talked about it some before, but it is kind of wild to see like how many similarities were there with our experiences. Um
Yeah.
Going up through Washington State from like smaller school where I'm one of 3 guys on my team who went on to go play college football. Um, the other 2 guys stopped to meet like pretty soon into their careers, as well as having I lost one of my closest friends the year before my senior year, um, who was committed to go play football at Utah State, and he was one of the closest people to me, and got that pressure of like wanting to make it and what goes into that and everything. So there was a lot of like carrying that pride of back home, as well as like wanting to carry on a legacy. And so when I go into Washington State and I'm rehabbing an injury from the start, like I was originally like supposed to go into fall camp and wasn't gonna go play right away, but there was a path, red shirt, do that time, prove myself, and then I get in that next year and maybe get some time. And then the week I come back from that injury I was coming into school with, I tore my meniscus, and my girlfriend dumped me, and it was that loss of identity for the first time, where football and her was like my whole life, and it's like, what am I doing now when I can't have either of that? And it felt like it was one after the other at Washington State, where I'd get a couple months in, and then there would be something else. I got sick for like a month or two, and like dropped 20 pounds, like all the injuries. Like I had 4 surgeries in the last 5 years of my career. I just wasn't getting my shot. Got buried in the depth chart, and you go in from everybody telling you how great you are and having all that validation all the time and not knowing how to give that to myself, to everybody here on this team is just as good as me and better. And so I'm not that guy anymore. And so the negative talk from college coaches really became my voice, because I didn't know how to soothe myself. And when I got buried in the depth chart after my second year and had a season ending shoulder injury, I decided to enter the transfer portal, take a chance on myself, and see if I can make this happen, like forever, for however long my body lets me play football. It was like a big loss, had a lot of friends there. And then there's always been the system, there's always been the structure of like how to make it to where you want to go. Um, and then you're jumping out of the plane with no parachute. Okay. Well, after that break, shout out Alsatta. Thank you again for being back here like 15 minutes later. Um, there's always been a system. There's always been an avenue and a semi clear path on how to get to where you're going. And when you lose that identity of athletics, there's a feeling of being lost. What's this transition been like for you, going from athlete to what am I doing?
I feel like being in college in the first place is a whole lot of what am I doing? But without being an athlete, the what am I doing is a lot bigger, definitely. So I guess when I stopped doing track, there was a whole lot of relief in the first place that, like, okay, I'm not performing anymore. There's no speculation on what I do, like how I just maneuvered in the world, you know? It was nice not having everyone looking at me for the first time ever. Felt terrible. But at
Yeah.
the same time, it was like, okay,
Don't have to
I can't.
filter those tweets anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. So that part of it felt, it was just relieving. But then there was also some guilt about being relieved about it because I was like, damn, like I should probably be trying a lot harder to want it again. And with that kind of guilt going on, like I did try to get back into like athletics again. Like I even talked to the coach at the university I go to now. And, I had that opportunity, but then I had to sit back and like really think to myself, is that really something I saw myself doing? Was it really going to benefit me? Especially like knowing all I know about like the politics of being a student athlete. If I wanted to say something or really make a difference, is that the place I wanted to be in to make that difference? So like I had a lot to think about. And I think I began to kind of like heal and find my identity again by first giving myself grace. Like I had to realize I was young at the time. There's not a lot of people I can talk to about what I was going through. Like coaches see your grades slipping and this and that, and they tell you to go to a tutor, and that's not enough. And even if they were to like offer mental health services, how many, people or counselors in those type of institutions, or even people of color or women of color, there wasn't that like that person I can go to that would really understand like my background, where I was coming from, all the pressure I was going to. So,
Mm-hmm.
I just had to give myself grace and start moving forward from there. And then once I gave myself grace about the whole situation, I guess it was kind of easier to move forward. I hold on, I wrote notes. So
Mm-hmm.
after I gave myself grace, it kind of helped me like stop dwelling on the past as much, like what could have been, like what I could have done better. Was it all my fault? And I mean, it kind of was my fault, but besides that, like I just had to get over that. Like, yes, I messed up. There's nothing I can do, and like if I did want to make a change, I would have done it by now. I would have tried harder by now, and I didn't. I wanted to do other things. I wanted to form a different identity, kind of go back to things before track, before sports and stuff like that. And that's kind of like what I started doing. And I also had to like reevaluate the people around me. Like, if you only really loved me because of my accomplishments, then that's not real love at all.
Mm-hmm.
And turns out, like, I thought my parents would be really mad at me, all this. And, like, sure, they were upset at me, but, time went on and that eventually, like, blew over and, like, life continued. And so it wasn't as, I was a lot harder on myself than I thought everyone else was going to be on me. It's kind of like the world kept moving, whether I was an athlete or not. And it was just up to me to realize that, like, I had to keep moving too. I couldn't just, keep thinking, like, oh, I'm an athlete. I'm an athlete. Like, no, like,
Mm-hmm.
find something else, get a life,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah.
But, and especially, like, I didn't want to be a has been either. I didn't want, like, everything I've ever done, all my accomplishments to just be like thrown out the window. Like I was still a smart person. I still had my experiences from sports. Maybe I could still be involved in sports some way, but maybe not as an athlete. I had to
Mm-hmm.
start thinking about like other alternative, because the love of the sport was still there, but maybe it's not going to manifest into like being like an Olympian. Maybe
Yeah.
it'll manifest into like starting a school and being a track coach and giving other people opportunity. So like I had to think, I had to start thinking bigger, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, that's, I had to, I don't know. There's a lot that went on. Like there's a lot of emotions over like the last couple of years. Even now, it's like I'm still forming that new self identity.
That get a life part is what stood out there among all the everything else you were saying, which was fantastic. But there were like for me, there was a lot of not having a life, especially like going into that transition with COVID. it's I'm locked in my room by myself, and all I have around me is those thoughts of being a failure.
Yeah.
And you start to linger. What I'm kind of curious on is like how much of a role self-talk played into that, and what that shift was like.
I think because I couldn't afford therapy, I still can't afford therapy. A lot of it had to do with like self talk, pulling myself out of it every time. And that also, like, the positive self talk wasn't always there. Like, I got there watching YouTube videos and trying to help myself, being tired of like, being tired of feeling how I was feeling, being tired of like just lingering on the past when there's nothing really I could do now. Like, I'm past my, well, I wouldn't say I'm past my window of like being an athlete, but it's just like not something that I want to put my body through anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I had to find a way to get over it, or it was going to continue to eat me up the inside. And so part of it was watching YouTube videos, reading a lot. I started reading a lot more. I was like a really big reader when I was younger, but it kind of went away in high school and college and stuff like that. And, you know, I started reading books that helped me think differently, I guess, about
Mm-hmm.
my situation. There's this book by Zora Neale Hurston. It's called The Eyes Were Watching God. In one of the chapters, she talks about there are some years that give you questions and some years that give you answers. And while I was having those negative self thoughts and trying to get out of it, like I figured like I don't have the answers, but maybe I should start doing things now that maybe if I plant these seeds, the answers might come along later, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So just doing little things like that, kind of like in hopes of like, okay, if I continue to do this little thing in the future, it might help me out. I don't know how, I don't know when, but it might.
It doesn't all happen at once. What
Yeah.
what were some of those seeds that you planted look like?
Starting to write more about my feelings and writing more and kind of making that like a routine consistent, like it helps me like kind of think about why I feel a certain way about things. It really helped me get through like the whole not being a student athlete any, like why did I feel like that towards that, like why was that such a huge loss, and why I was having such a hard time like finding my way out of that and finding a
Mm-hmm.
new identity and kind of like going back to my roots and stuff like that. Everyone says like heal your inner child, do this, do that. But like if you can't talk to yourself to really like get to the roots about why you're feeling a certain way about how you're feeling, like it's not gonna work. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the time they just people just throw those words out there like heal, find your inner child, this and that, but it's really freaking hard to do.
Yeah.
So some of the seeds I started planting was just writing every day, thinking about the thoughts I thought, reading more, watching better content on social media, doing less social media, like tiny seeds like that. I feel like kind of gave me the ability to even be on this podcast today to be talking to you about this stuff. So,
Well, I'm really glad you are here. Something that I picked up that really helped me was speaking to yourself like a loved one.
that's a good
And
one.
and that was like, holy shit, what? Like I wouldn't talk to anyone the way I talk to myself. Like no chance those words are coming out of my mouth and I'm saying that to someone. And when I started to shift that, or I watched this comedian who talked about going to therapy, and he was on the topic of self talk, and he said, "Now I talk to myself the way an NBA player talks to the media," and he goes, people are saying you might be the worst person ever. And he goes, well, people are entitled to their opinions. And that shift is something that was just so crazy that I hadn't thought about before. What
Right.
what advice would I give to a loved one who's going through the same thing I am? Because I know I wouldn't talk to them like this. I'd like to hear more about what notes you got.
Okay, well, I'm like flipping through the pages right now, trying to find like something to say because I recently wrote a note that kind of went with like self talk and all that stuff, and it was like on a YouTube video I was watching. If you're a smart person, it's really hard to argue against yourself because you already know all your best arguments and you already have your counter arguments with that.
Mm.
And sometimes all what you really need to do is acknowledge that you're a pretty smart person and just go to sleep and let your thoughts just lay to rest because you keep like arguing back and forth with yourself and it's not gonna really cause any peace because you've already convinced yourself otherwise. So sometimes it's good to let those thoughts flow in and out. And then if they can't, just go to sleep and start your day and a new routine and this and that. And that helped me a lot because when I was going through it, I had a lot of negative thoughts and I had a lot of reasons to believe those negative thoughts. But I also had a lot of counter reasons too. And if I can't come to a conclusion within myself, then I just need to acknowledge these are thoughts. And if I stop thinking about them, I'm going to have new thoughts eventually. And that's helped me a lot.
That is
Oh,
so
I found the
fascinating.
page.
Oh, okay.
I found the page. Also, holding myself accountable was pretty impactful because a lot of the times I found out that because I didn't have that good inner voice and I also did things to get outside validation. Sometimes when that validation wasn't there, I would lie to myself about things I would say I would do and I didn't complete them. And that also like it adds on to the feeling bad about yourself. So holding myself accountable is tiring, but it's also rewarding because it's telling the truth to yourself and being honest and you owe yourself that honesty and you owe yourself to follow through with those things. So I thought that was pretty helpful in helping me come out of that slum.
What is the narrative I am giving myself? That was Dr. Michael Gervais, the sports psychologist for the Seahawks. And that's something like I really think about, and that made me think about that quote. You're always going to tell yourself things that are going to make you feel better. This person did this. It's either I'm the hero or the victim in a situation. And I think on the topic of holding yourself accountable, when you're not actively thinking about that, in a way you're almost manipulating yourself with those lies or excuses as to why you're doing those things. And that's something I think is so fascinating. Like you can get really comfortable in beating yourself up, being the victim, and then also not taking accountability for your faults. So I'm glad
Yeah.
you brought that up because that was very that was powerful.
But I appreciate it. But yeah, holding yourself accountable is like a huge thing. And it's a big thing to change because, you know, if you haven't held yourself accountable before with your feelings and your actions that you're taking, it feels like really cringy to change those things because you haven't necessarily like acknowledged that those things are, I guess, wrong. You haven't taken accountability for them. So I think like a huge part of like that finding your self identity is kind of like getting out of your old habits that held you back and changing those habits. It's cringy because they don't feel good because they're new, you know?
Mm.
And that was a big thing for me, finding new habits, finding new ways to make myself feel good about other people validating me. It felt weird because it was new, but it's needed.
Getting comfortable being uncomfortable. That's like,
Yeah.
and especially in like the era where like everybody's becoming like the mental health professional online, and like the positive self-talk and all that, like maybe not as much positive self-talk as like real self-talk,
Yeah,
honest,
because the real is
accountable.
it's not pretty all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Not all.
Well, thank you. I'm really glad I got to have this conversation with you.
I'm glad I got to have this conversation as well, finally.
Finally. How can people reach you?
Don't reach me. Don't
Okay,
don't know
okay,
I
okay.
No,
Don't
I'm
perceive
kidding.
me.
Yeah, right. Don't perceive me. No, I actually have to stop doing that. But you can follow my Instagram at Alsatta, which is AL.SATTA. And yeah, that's the social media I probably interact with people on the most. So yeah.
Awesome. And I'll link that in the notes. Thank you again. Any closing statements?
Yeah, just one.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of athletes out there, and more specifically, athlete of colors that come into collegiate sports with a lot of baggage, and there's not enough people helping them unpack that baggage. And even more, there's not enough people with the right tools or similar backgrounds as these athletes to even begin unpacking. So I just think that, I don't know, the future of collegiate sports should probably put more emphasis and more money in having a more diverse group of counselors for these student athletes to reach out to, because I feel like if I had that opportunity, maybe things would have gone differently. But as I'm sitting here now, I'm thankful things didn't go differently because I wouldn't have this opportunity to talk about it. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Very well said. And I very much agree on the topic of representation and giving athletes that opportunity to talk to someone who has a similar experience as them. Somebody like comes from a like well-off white family, um, very well represented in collegiate athletics with other rich old white dudes, um, usually getting a lot what I have to say. So I can't imagine going through that where people don't understand what my life looks like or my thoughts. But again, thank you so much for being vulnerable with me and whoever listens to this. And I'm gonna take notes on things you said. And I'd like to chat with you more. I'm glad that we're getting to do this. So just very grateful for you. So thank you.
Thank you, Beau, and it was a pleasure being on your show and talking to you again.
That was Alsatta Bakana. Really great conversation there. Isn't she great? Her link to her Instagram will be in the show notes. Special thank you to Dylan Scott for helping through a pretty brutal break in the content there, um, and for making the theme music for the Beau Show, or whatever this is called. Thank you for listening. I'm grateful for all of you, or if it's just one, thanks, Mom. Um, love you. Peace.